first.
We get started. Okay, I call the December meeting to order. Like to welcome people. Do we have any people on Zoom?
We have some staff on Zoom.
Okay, great. Well, people in person, welcome, and people on Zoom, welcome. So everybody get a chance to read we have two sets of minutes. One was, from the work session. Everybody get a chance to read that. Did they have any corrections or anything we want to change from that?
I would move that we approve the November 8th, 2023 board work session minutes.
Okay, a second.
I'll second.
Second. How about the, November meeting?
Well,
Board meeting?
do we want to do one at a time?
Oh, you don't want me to go one at a time? You want me to-
No, we do want to, yeah, should we vote?
Oh, I'm sorry, we didn't vote.
Sorry.
Remember,
I
this
didn't stop.
is not usually my role. Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay. All right, so, all right, how about the, November meeting minutes? Any corrections?
I think it's a correction, and I may be wrong on this. But on the second page, under the MUFTI discussion, it said no second motion failed, and I think technically it should say motion failed or motion died for lack of second.
Okay.
Because, I mean, if we did, saying it failed implies we voted and didn't
Yes.
vote.
Okay.
And I like that, it's much more dramatic that it died.
Okay, got it. So we approve with the,
Approved with,
with the correction.
yes, approved with
Okay.
correction.
So,
So I move to approve the November 8th, 2023 board meeting with correction as noted.
And I will second.
okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passed. We don't think so. Okay, so we've got quite the.
Public
got a lot of
comments.
things to do. Oh, that's right, comments from citizens.
And I believe we do not have it.
Okay, okay, thank you. All right, so,
And
so I think we're ready for Greg's, update on the. lounge.
Jump right in, huh? Good morning or afternoon. To see you. So just running through things, talking about schedule, overall our schedule hasn't changed. It's progressing pretty much as planned. I think, when we look at Sunriver, we found a few things that are unexpected conditions that we're dealing with, and there's some framing, some structural issues that how they built the building back in the day necessarily wasn't quite what we need to do today, and so we're making those adjustments. And so those things, they have the potential for a schedule impact. The team is looking at that. They're probably going to reassess in January where they're at and whether or not there's really any extension to the construction time period. So there's no real action. It's kind of something just new that we've been discussing this month in a little bit more detail, but thought I'd just give you a little heads up of what's going on out there. On Redmond, it's advancing right along construction. A lot of activity is happening up there. A lot of progress is happening. For those of you who get a chance to drive by every once in a while and see it, it's really moving right along. So we're doing a schedule evaluation with Kirby this month, and it's really meant to talk about where we at, how's it going. We're in the last third coming up. They are done, basically in just a little over 6 months with construction at the end of June. So far, when we have had curveballs, they've been able to deal with them and absorb those. We're always evaluating, hey, is there anything that's really gonna affect our end date so that we can prepare for that? So that's what we're gonna do, and I'll share with you in January how that discussion goes and if there's anything that is of concern there, but right now there isn't. Stevens Ranch is Central Library at Stevens Ranch. And I'm gonna get that right. As we move. So, it's moving right along. So we had a very major milestone achieved this month. And that was, we hit our 95% construction documents. That's our final city plan check submittal. So it went in, last week. We also got plans distributed to all of the team, and, then they will actually get to 100% construction documents in January. Our plan check process is progressing well. I think I've noted that our site improvement permit is right on track for completion and issuance here at the end of the month. Our foundation or structural permit, we got our first round of plan check comments. The design team addressed them and resubmitted back into plan check. So we're in second round of review, and that's tracking right at or just slightly ahead of our schedule, our planned timeline. So that's really looking good. We anticipate having that permit in the latter part of March. And so that's looking to be right on track, doing well. There were no real concerning comments from the city about that plan check. So that was very positive. With our 95% set, we did a page turn yesterday with the architect and their consultants, and to really highlight what were the final little adjustments and where they were at. And so the documents looked good. They look where they should be at this point. So from that progress, it's really well. We actually had our first, call it kickoff of Downtown Bend Library. So yesterday, as we went through our meeting, we just went back and went to our concepts drawings that we did back in 2021. And opened them back up and walked through and had a great discussion about what had we planned and what have we learned since, and what were any new thoughts. And it's really to help make sure that when we launch into Downtown Bend this next year, because that'll happen after Central Library gets wrapped up, and we take off on that latter part of January and into February. But so it's kind of exciting to say, wow, we're actually starting to talk about the renovation of Downtown Bend, what that's going to become, because that's going to be another, to me, a very exciting project and transformation of that building from what it is today and what it's going to be in the future. So schedule-wise, things are very positive, very moving as planned and expected. On a schedule standpoint, East Bend, because we're sitting here today, one of the things next month, we're going to talk about a proposed scope of work of what would we do here and do that. And that's something that we really want to get through that, have discussion with targets of really putting that into place and into schedule while we are going through Central before ever closing down Downtown Bend, so that we can really strategically plan that time frame and sequence that work and see how does it affect what's going on over at Redmond and Sunriver, because those are both going to be coming back online here the second half of the year with a lot of move-ins, a lot of openings, and a lot of activity for staff. And so we'll look at how we plan out East Bend as well. And so that'll start coming back into activity as anticipated. So the budget, so went through and looked at quite a few things. We had a few changes to the budget, so I really tried to note them. One of the big changes, and we talked about this last month, was the money that we had moved out of contingencies and into a line item to hold it for potential tax liability because of the investment earnings. And I mentioned it last month that Robert and I met with the arbitrage consultant attorney who did our report and thoroughly understood exactly what the report was saying to us and what we could do. And we had gone real conservative and said, boy, we got to put it all away. And they came back and said, no, that's not correct. Here's the amount that is actually available to DPL to utilize. And so that was the change that you saw, where I reduced that set aside and moved those funds back into contingencies. And so it went into the master reserve contingency. And then it also went some of it into the branches. And that's for Sisters, Lapine, Sunriver, East Bend, and is where those funds move to. I don't see any change happening in that until the next arbitrage report, which will be next fall.
Yeah.
So probably about this time next year, we'll update what's going on with those earnings and the arbitrage and whether or not those are usable funds or if they have to be funded to Uncle Sam.
Exactly.
So on some of the others, there's really nothing changed on the administrative budget. On the central budget, I did increase our builder's risk line item. It's part of the soft costs, and that was based on current pricing that we're getting in. And the industry is continuing to see a push upwards in insurance cost and premiums. Separate from this, I got a report just this week from one of our brokers and that put it out, and it's about the insurance across the nation and across multiple different types of products and buildings and stuff. And they were just reiterating that there continues to be an up push in premium costs. So what we're seeing in actual quotes coming in, they're seeing across the board. And they are sending it out to, inform us as developers and builders to say, hey, you need to be planning for this because the reality is those insurance costs continue to climb. So we planned for that. That did come out of that contingency, out of the project there. So that way it's didn't increase the overall budget, but reallocated some contingency. No changes to downtown Bend or Redmond. Those stayed the same. Work package 4, which are the branches, had the biggest amount of change in the budget. And there's also some approval letters or authorization that we'll go through. And this has to do with some work that we've been studying for the last about 3-4 months. And it has to do with changing our control systems. And I'll walk through each of those. But what I did in the budget side is I looked at, okay, what are these costs? How are we going to fund them? And it came out of contingency, but it pulled our contingency level pretty low within that project. So when I moved those earnings back into contingency, that's why I moved some of it back over to the branches to really make sure that we are still targeting a contingency within the branches that I felt kept us at an appropriate level for the surprises. And I think one of the things that, as we went through Sisters and Lapine, we were really able to absorb almost all costs within SunWest's GMP. And so we never touched our contingency for any changes and cost impacts. And not to say that we didn't have them, we did, because being the first projects out, we were making adjustments and changes. We had schedule impacts and they absorbed all of that. And there were some costs. So that really freed up and allowed us to say, hey, we've got funds available within the work package to make consideration of these upgrades that we'll go through in more detail about the control systems. So that was the biggest changes that occurred within work package 4. And I tried to itemize them, and they go through all 3, Sisters, Lapine, and Sunriver. Reserve contingency and then bond financing. I think all of those I hit on there. So insurance, we will talk about the formal approval for the DSIP insurance. And that's the district supplied insurance program for liability, and we're doing the formal extension of that, as well as the Central Library Builder's Risk Policy. And so I'll go through those in more detail. Design and construction, as I mentioned, with Central, we're at that 95%, and pushing to 100%. Not seeing any significant concerns about our design. I think everybody's pretty happy with how it's ending up. I'm not hearing a lot of requests for big changes, but nice fine tuning of our design. So I think it just tells me that as we've developed the design, it's been consistent and continuing to develop on what DPL's asking for. And, you know, sometimes there's cutbacks and managing to our budget. We did go out this with a 75% set and rechecked our construction budget again. And it's within budget. We still have within the budget, the estimate that Kirby puts together, we carry a design and estimating contingency. And that continues till we finalize the GMP, but we're not eating into it real deep, where it's actually in a pretty healthy position, which allows us to get through plan check comments coming from the city and all the final fine tuning, and even the evaluation of some alternates that we said, we're gonna wait and make a decision on this till later when we know we have money to fund it, instead of just putting it in and then have to try and cut it out. So that was a very positive thing, as I looked at it and said, okay, I have a very high level of confidence that our desired program that's in the plans and our budget are very much aligned. So I think our risk level is really dropping fast. And so our final GMPs will take place over the next 4 to 6 months. Some items will be bidding off of the 95%. We'll probably have an amendment to discuss in January, another one in February, and then probably about 2 months after that. So, and that's just to let us catch plan check comments and everything. Some trades we need to bring on now, some we don't need because it's a 2-year build. We don't need them for 4 or 5 months. So that's a process we'll go through there. The other components of design, we went through early learning for Central this month, and they're at about a 33% completion. That was as of the beginning of the month on their construction documents. And they kind of follow right behind the architect's plans. As we really develop the building, they are continuing to develop theirs. So that's progressing well. We're looking at that. Our furniture package is same thing. It's at a state that it's probably about 75% set. And then after the 100% building plans are done, we'll launch into finalizing furniture. And that'll happen over the final 6 months. And both of those systems will really come online. The shelving is actually real close tracking to the building, to where it's I would say it's going to be at a little less than 100% when the building plans are, because we're always fine tuning the shelving as it works in with early learning, as it works with furniture. And we really look at, hey, are we getting what we want, right? It's actually one of the most important pieces. It holds the books and shares them to the community. And so we do spend a lot of time tweaking that. And I expect that to continue to happen until we're real happy with what we've got in design. So, plan check, like I said, that's moving right along. With the Redmond library, the early learning was completed, priced out. We'll talk about that. There's really not a lot of design activity left on it. It's really if we find a change or we look at something and say, hey, we want to tweak this or adjust this. Some lessons learned, things like that. So it's very minor. It's really just maintenance of our documents as we continue through construction. Same with Sisters in Lapine. They're really closed out. wrapped up, dealing with some punch list items and that kind of stuff. And then the planning for these upgrades that we'll talk about a little bit later here. And otherwise, they're in the finish stage. Sunriver is, all the plans are done, permits are all done, and it's in the construction build, just like Redmond. And it's truly kind of a maintenance level at this point. And then East Bend and downtown Bend will be what's coming up this next year. So those are all moving. And that's it. So from a standpoint of the report, it's kind of everything that I've got in there, all my comments.
Any questions?
I had a question,
Mhm.
and this is just a format type of a thing. I'm wondering on our budget, status things and all of that, would it be helpful to start listing a percentage of budget spent? Or is that, I mean, I don't want to cause extra work, but as we get closer on some of these projects, and I know that costs come in at various points during the
Yeah.
construction process, so is that stupid, or is that?
It's actually information that's in my master budget.
I'm sure it
to
is.
show To add it to your report is actually very easy.
Would that be helpful?
And what I would suggest is there's commitments.
Right.
Contracts, and then there's expenditures, actual payments, and I would put both of those in a percentage basis. And I would just add them off to the right.
Yeah, I mean, to me,
Now, it
that-
will make the report a little small, work
Yeah.
on my mark, shrink the cells as much as possible,
Mhm.
and try not to make the size, the font size too small.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard with these numbers to do those I mean, I find myself doing those estimates mentally all the time, and if it were just there, it would be easier. I
Yeah.
think.
I think that's a great.
Yeah,
idea.
no, I think those kinds of things that ideally, this gives you a good snapshot of where we're at
Right,
without you having to do any math.
right.
So, no, ask me and I can do those.
Yeah, no, and,
Especially as the projects are wrapping
Yeah.
up, it makes sense.
right, it's,
Do you have any questions?
No, I just think that's just another piece for us to look at.
Yeah.
More process wise, where we are
Yeah.
in the process, yeah.
I had two minor questions.
Mhm.
What does MEP stand for?
So it's mechanical, electrical and plumbing.
Oh.
So
okay.
it's a brief, it's those trades.
Okay, thank you. I kept trying to find other places in the report room.
Yeah.
And then this is probably a dumb question, but, I know that basically both Sisters and Lapine, they were gutted to totally, I'm assuming the same thing's happening in the downtown, will it be totally gutted?
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, there's a lot of good components of the downtown library that will still be there. Structurally, we're not going to affect the building. At almost zero at this point. But all of the finishes and the interiors, will change I wouldn't say 100%, because there's areas that we don't have to touch. We may change some finishes, but it's a pretty significant change. Yeah.
that's been one of the most exciting aspects of this whole project
Yeah.
is the changes that are gonna happen there. I think people will really be excited to see
Yeah,
how much functionality is gonna be added to that building.
I think so, because there's such a large administrative presence and function in that building today that will be in central. That when we looked at those plans, it's like, okay, this area is now going to the public and this area is going to create a lot more public space for everybody to use and programs and all the good stuff these guys will utilize it for. So I think it's gonna have as dramatic of a transformation as anything we've done.
Right,
Even though from the outside, it's gonna look like the same library.
Right, yeah, but I think people will be wowed.
Yes.
Okay, I'm assuming you're also doing the, land purchase closing costs.
Yep. So you run through those. So the first one up is the land purchase closing cost. So we've set a date for closing on the land for Stevens Ranch. And it's January 4th. Developers got everything ready to deliver to us as far as their requirements under the purchase sale agreement and Compass Commercial, Dan Kemp, who you guys have all talked to in the past. He's busy working with them to bring this to our closing. So what we ended up with was getting our final closing statement from title here just a couple weeks ago. And this just defines what the final costs are. And so we always had our land cost in there. What we needed and what the authorization for is the final closing costs. And that picks up things like brokerage fees and title fees and those types of things. So it's really not the cost of the land, it's closing costs, as any of us who bought properties know.
Yeah.
So that's what that is. It's the 130,000 in authorization. I think it'll be under that by a little bit. I think the estimate was at about 118 or so. If I remember right, over our land purchase was the 10,250,000. And so it's about 118,000. I rounded it up just a little bit as we fine tune those because it was a preliminary estimate, but that's getting tightened up, so. Any questions?
Questions? We have a motion.
I move to authorize the library director to authorize payment of the central library at Stevens Ranch purchase and sale agreement closing costs in an amount not to exceed $130,000.
Wait a second. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries. Now we're gonna move on to, I think, these are kind of, oh no, this is the insurance program.
Yeah.
Extension.
Yeah, so this is the DSIP, which is the district supplied insurance program. This is the overall general liability insurance program that we purchased early in the bond program. We had based it on a certain duration. When we moved the central library from Rowell to Stevens Ranch, we went through a whole schedule issue at that time. I talked to DPL's insurance broker, who was Brown and Brown, back at that time, and they said, well, policy is good for this length of time. Let's not renew it right now, a year ago. They said, make sure your schedule is good and tight. So as we went through this past year, and our last update to the master schedule was in September, I then sat down again with them here this fall and said, here's where we're at. Sisters is done, Lapine is done, Redmond, Sunriver are under construction. Central is, here's that schedule, here's the downtown Bend schedule. And so they said, well, it appears this is a good time to go back to the carriers and talk about what are the alternatives that we have to extend the policy. Because we talked about, well, do we let this policy end and we buy a new one with a smaller amount? Can we do that? Do we want to do that? And after B&B went back, Brown, and talked to them, they came back and said, our recommendation is that you extend this policy. It carries a very long-term, a 10-year coverage all the way through. And so that was what the carrier was willing to offer. Because one, if we were trying to buy a partial policy on some of it, they weren't very interested in that, because all of a sudden we were breaking up our bond program. So what's in front is the extension. So it's the authorization for the additional premiums, and those are planned for and built into the budget. I did a budget adjustment, I think 2 months ago on that. But that's what this is. So this is we're ready to actually bind them here after the first of the year. So with this authorization, we would tell B&B to bind the extension. And that will take us out through March 1st of 2027. And that's in alignment with our current master development schedule for the completion of downtown Bend. And we talked about it. They did not recommend buying more, excess time, because you pay for something that you may never need. And so as we looked at our schedule, currently, we're planning to be done in January of 2027. And they kind of do it in increments of quarters and stuff. And this actually aligned that it was a pure 2-year extension from our current policy. So any questions?
So that extends the 10-year statute. I assume there should be statute of repose for
It's
all projects. For all projects.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
it carries that 10 years from that date.
Yeah.
The other piece, and I didn't mention this, that goes with that is we have an administrator who we hired at the very beginning, who administers this insurance program for us. And it's a company that's their specialty. And so they enroll every subcontractor, every contractor, every vendor, and they monitor their insurance, make sure that it's what they're supposed to carry is still active and that they're properly enrolled in this. And so, and we have them from the beginning on a fixed fee per year. That plan is in place. So I did include those dollars so that we will continue to pay them through the end of the policy.
So Greg, here down towards the bottom, it says the DSIP administrator cost is $80,000. Is that what you were just talking about, the administrator?
Yes,
That $80,000 covers what time frame? That yearly, or is that the length of?
that was the original length.
Okay,
And then I'm increasing it by the 40,000 to take it to a total of 120.
Okay.
And that'll pick up all of the years, and then they had an initial setup fee that we paid at the very beginning.
So we're starting, you're giving us the figures of what you originally were paying, and then with the extension, the
Yeah.
additional added on.
Yeah, and the way I wrote the very last paragraph there on the authorization up to the 2.8 million, that is the original premium plus the increase and the original administration plus the increase. So when I wrote it that way so that it is, I thought would be easier.
Yeah.
Because you're approving the ultimate limit.
Because we've already paid them a portion of that original block. So
Yeah.
this is just-
Yeah, for the insurance, we actually paid them all of the original premium, and then you do pay for all of it up front. The insurance company does,
So we're
Secure.
basically saying the total just cannot exceed this.
Right.
Do you have a motion or any more questions?
I move to authorize the library director to authorize Brown and Brown to bind the DSIP coverage extension and extended administrative cost in an amount not to exceed $2,800,000 for the combined total costs.
Second, all those in favor? Those opposed? All right, so now we're going to move on to, this is the one that's.
next one is builder's risk insurance. Yeah, so this is for central, so we have builder's risk insurance policies on all of the projects, and they're bought specific for the project on an individual basis. And this we'll bind it so it's in place when we commence construction. So it's set for January 15th. It may actually get bound a week earlier than that. Right now, what we did is we've gone out to the market. The carriers give you 30 days from the quote to binding. Otherwise, they want to re-quote it. And so what Brown and Brown did is they went out, got some preliminary quotes so that they could tell me, hey, here's where we think it's gonna come in at this. So I could come to you and say, okay, here's the authorization level. I currently have an authorization level of 1.4 million. We got a preliminary estimate of about 1,344,000. And one of the things Brown and Brown does is they go through and make sure that all of the sub limits within and all the coverages are correct. And so sometimes we do have minor adjustments in those that can affect that premium. We do expect there's one more big carrier that is looking at it, that hasn't given us any quote yet, but are looking at it. And we invited them up to all the prior projects, but they said they're too small. Central Library being the size, and it's a really large international carrier that writes a lot of these policies, but they write them on big projects. Often you can get favorable terms with them and coverage limits. So they're working with two different groups right now to finalize that. And so this would be authorization up to that 1.4 million. I think it's going to come in somewhere between the 1,344,000 and that 1.4 is where it will ultimately land in what we would pay for it. But that's something we do want to bind it by the end of this month.
Any questions? We have a motion.
Okay. I move to authorize the library director to approve the builder's risk insurance policy and payment of the central library at Stevens Ranch insurance premium in an amount not to exceed $1.4 million.
Second. All those in favor? All those opposed? Okay. All right, now this is the one that's part of 3, right?
What's that?
This next portion that we're doing?
So the next
Oh, no,
one
this
should
is
be
the Redmond.
Redmond Early Learning. So this is all of the early learning components, and this is what we finished up design end of October, beginning of November, went through a whole pricing for final pricing, final adjustments to the design quantities, that thing. And we looked at that kind of stuff. What were some of the lessons learned from Sisters and Lapine of what did they like? What did they not like? You want more because we had unit prices. We could say, delete those 2 things, but give us another one of these. And so the public and staff's reaction to these components at Sisters and Lapine have actually influenced this to where we're tweaking our quantities. So this is the contract with Figure Plant, who is the builder of all these custom pieces. We have them under a master contract. And so this is this piece. I did attach their latest estimate there of all the little parts and pieces, not that you have to approve any little piece, but our recommendation is for authorization to execute it's a contract change order for up to the 650,000. The current estimate is slightly below that, and that gives us a little bit of adjustment as we fine tune any future adjustments without spending excessive amounts of. Any questions on that?
What was the original budget for this?
So the budget on it was set at like about 750,000 with design costs in there.
Mhm.
And this budget is probably about 18,000, or this cost is about 18,000 more than what we had planned for construction costs. So it's not far off of what we had targeted. I think we were targeting 620 some thousand. And so it's a little more than 18. And because we had already paid a certain amount of design fees and pre-construction cost to Figure Plant. But overall, it has stayed real close to our budget. And I would say that is in part to DPL making choices. Because at one point, we had probably a little bit more designed in than we needed or wanted, and, or could afford. And so we went back, and that was 2-3 months ago, as we, you know, how we always would do cost estimates as we went along. And we looked at it and said, okay, we're targeting to now go up over 700,000, and we're not gonna do that. And, so they looked at what components weren't necessary, and there was a good menu of options.
Does the cost increase, due to, because of the changes in the decisions of what pieces you wanted and what pieces you decided not to take?
I think it was really more, so when we set the budgets for the early learning, we had a $5 million overall budget for the bond program. And we said, we're gonna spend 750,000 on Redmond, and 750,000 on downtown Bend, and like 2.5 million on Central, and then 250,000 on each of the others, without actually having anything designed. And so it was a bit of, hey, let's put target budgets and then design to the budget. So it's really, I think, not so much as we changed stuff as our budget was really undefined, but we worked towards it. I've always carried a contingency, one of our contingencies in there, to cover adjustments for that. But that's really what it is. I think that it's, you know, they're very unique pieces that have been created. And so as we went, and like I said, at one point we could see we were going over our target budget. And that's when we said, okay, we got to make some adjustments here. And that's actually gone, that process has gone through almost every time.
One thing I'll add, since we did go over the target and we brought it back, is, at least in the staff side, the things we did to bring it back actually improved the project. We're kind of learning that from some of our original ones, is we try to add everything. And sometimes less is more. And so I'm pretty happy with where it's going, because it actually is coming out to be a better product by the changes.
Yeah, this was one of those areas where we kind of had no idea until we saw it in action, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, and you know, it was, we knew we wanted something, didn't know what it was gonna be, because they're all unique and custom. Now we have a system, a lot of components that will be able to go across the district back and forth. But then with the bigger libraries, they have more, the larger structures that are there that are 100% unique.
Right. I'm excited.
We have an motion?
Yes, I move to authorize the library director with signing authority up to $650,000 for the Redmond Library's early learning component.
Second, I will second. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
Going great. Great for.
We're halfway through, Greg. Yeah, oh, there's a few more.
And these ones, these are all very similar.
These start to become very similar. And these are also all about the branches here.
I just want to highlight, Greg was very jealous last month that Robert got all the time.
Yeah.
Get back.
Really?
And rubber was a joy.
Yes. Yeah. So then there's 4 more that we're going through here. And I would like to kind of talk broadly about all of them. Because they're all so very similarly
All
related.
4 of them are, okay.
Yeah, so
Okay, yeah.
what I did is, there's one for Lapine, one for Sisters, and one for Sunriver for SunWest builders who are GC, their contract adjustments. But a lot of what's in each of them are similar, yet some of a little bit of difference. And then the last one has to do with commissioning of our mechanical system, because we're making these changes. So as we got to the end of Sisters and Lapine, we go through, so every month we go through the budgets with our GCs, both SunWest and Kirby. And I say we didn't, myself and my project managers, Mike and James and Chris, and really look at the details of their cost, how it's going, because the format of our contract is a very open book format. It's the CMGC method. And so we're able to see how they're spending money and what the budgets are for everything and how their contingencies are working, because at the end of the day, if there's any savings, it reverts back to the district. And as we go through, and this is true with Sisters and Lapine and with SunWest, is that we looked at, we set a GMP, they purchased subcontracts and made those commitments, and then they had budgets for a lot of work of, especially with remodels, of the unknowns and the unforeseens. They had a contractor's contingency, and we also carried a escalation because we were experiencing a lot of inflation and cost increases back at that time. So there was dollars within the GMP to pay for work that subcontractors were going to perform or SunWest would perform. And so as we went through, the only change orders we processed with SunWest during the course of construction was 2 credit change orders they gave back to us on Sisters and Lapine, both of them. And it had to do with a correction in the door system. And so that was done then. Then at the end of the job, after absorbing all cost changes for everything we made changes to, we ended up with a credit on Lapine, which I think, and there's a little summary tab behind each of these, which was about $24,000 credit on that contract. On Sisters, it was an add of about $42,000. So we saw one go up and one go down, and it just had to do with how the original GMPs were set and what were the surprises or the impacts that we had along the way. And so we were actually very, very pleased with how that ended up. And so this is a finalization change order piece that will finalize their original GMP. You know, one of the things we went through, you know, we had impacts with our schedule. We rotated which building went when, and we had the electrical gear delays and the mechanical equipment delays. That was all factored in here. So their time, their supervision time and costs associated with that was all absorbed. And so in the end, when you look at them combined, we ended up with about $20,000 of excess for everything that we did. And there's probably a good $200,000 to $300,000 of value that they were able to absorb within the GMP and use those dollars for the interest of the project. And so that's one of the reconciliations in here. And that's only on Sisters and Lapine because they're closed, doesn't affect Sunriver. The next one that is on that spreadsheet is the Allerton HVAC controls. When we entered into the planning of the branches, so this is true of all 3, Sisters, Lapine, and Sunriver. We evaluated all of the mechanical and the lighting and electrical systems, and we said, here's all the changes we want to do to upgrade, because the age of those systems is that if we didn't fix them now, the district would have been facing in 5 to 7 years, equipment starting to fail because of its age, and right back in there fixing them. And so we said, no, we're going to fix all of this. We looked at the control systems, and this is, you see the thermostats on walls, but there's also a bigger component that's back behind, you know, that actually controls the mechanical systems. And mechanical is all the heating and cooling equipment and ventilation. we chose to, from a budget standpoint, not to upgrade the controls back then. And that we were gonna reuse the existing controls. And then part was driven a lot by, hey, they're working, they're simple, and we gotta protect the budget. So we chose not to do that. And the same is with our, we'll talk about lighting separately, but that's the HVAC. The other part to that was, as we designed the new buildings, so we're in design of Redmond and Central. And we really looked at what we're gonna do at downtown Bend, because it also has a major renovation component to it. One of the goals of the district was, can we have control systems that are the same across every building? Much more energy efficient systems that are gonna pay for themselves over time, but simpler and easier for staff to use. So whether they walk into one building or another building, the controls are always the same. At the maintenance level of it, they are also they're set up so that staff can be sitting in one building and look at any building remotely. And to get in there and help control and look at settings and how the buildings are functioning. So they don't have to drive out. The systems that we had in these buildings, the older systems, is if you wanted to go see what was going on, you drove there. And so the labor and the time and efficiency of that is very low. These new systems they can be sitting in any one of the locations. They can be on their phone and look at all of them. And that, for the mechanical system, that's really important. And the same with the lighting controls, because that's the other system that we want to upgrade. So we locked in, really, we needed systems that could control the mechanical systems on Central and Redmond and even downtown Bend are much different, more elaborate than what's in the small branches. So we really had to figure out what's the right controls for those, because we knew they would be able to apply. And so there's a name on here called Allerton, and it's just the manufacturer's name. But that's the system that we've landed on that we'll use throughout. And so in here is to go back into Sisters and Lapine and retrofit those controls. At Sunriver, it will be just built in as part. And so the cost of the system was much less. It's already built into the costs of the other three big projects. So this is really kind of a one-time thing here. The lighting controls, which is the next one, that's the Leviton lighting controls. And again, Leviton is the manufacturer's name. We put in a new control system at Sisters and Lapine. It's called Watt Stopper. But as we really were evaluating what's the big picture view of lighting controls, we determined long-term value is to have one standardized system across the board. Again, for being able to control it, to program it, to get in and do things with it. It's a standard system that's used throughout, but it's a really good system. And we determined that it's really the best option for DPL. And I think one of the things that it's really going to do is, we always talked about our energy efficiency and energy usage, is these types of control systems help to really keep so that you don't flick on a light and let it burn for hours. It will dim itself, it will turn it down, it can be programmed to do different things. So it gives the district a lot of options in how to manage their buildings over the long term. And so for Sisters and Lapine, it's going in and replacing the systems in there today. Sunriver, we were actually able to absorb it in the GMP. SunWest, because we made the decision early enough. They said it's a no cost for us there, and we just were able to swap it out. And it's the system that is being used also at Redmond and planned for Central downtown. So those are really big upgrades, and there's some big pricing in that, you know, they're not inexpensive, but they do, the return over time will more than pay for themselves in energy usage. There's a little bit more on Sisters and Lapine, which is some exterior light fixtures, and that just happens to be, and it's really mostly at Lapine, where we had some light fixtures that were, they're set too low, and the kids can reach up and grab, or somebody might bang their head. So we're picking new ones. It's not a lot of money, but I put it in here in these totals. The other thing on Sunriver that I've added into that one, just to go through all of it, was when you look at the Sunriver spreadsheet, there's the Allerton controls that we talked about. And then door access controls and revisions. And this is really a number of changes that we did. We absorbed a lot of this in Sisters and Lapine, like I said, but here we're adding it in. And a big chunk of the change is we're gonna replace a number of storefront entry doors and hardware. Just their age and how they function and operate, and how we want them to function and operate with the automatic door controllers and everything else, was a big part of the change in here. And then access controls of how each door is controlled through. We have a master system set up now with Siemens that controls all of this. And it standardizes everything. This is something we've been planning on. We just hadn't rolled it into Sunriver. We got it figured out on Sisters on the Pine first and done, and then rolling it in here. The structural revisions are the item that I mentioned in the schedule that as we did the demo and stripped out everything in the building and looked at it, we found a number of things of how it was built that just was subpar. You know, there were some things we knew up front, and we put more money in to do some structural upgrades, and we found more, all doable, all fixable, but all required. And then the last one there on the operable glass wall. So, you know, at the community rooms at Sisters and Lapine, we've got those and have not been happy with how they function, how they nest together, how the hardware works. A lot of concerns about pinching people's hands if they're trying to move it and slide it back. It's a really good manufacturer, one of the best in the industry, but this particular application wasn't good. We've located a different manufacturer, different door system. DPL has had the opportunity to actually go visit locally here over at the Grove, where there's a system there that functions much better. It's more expensive. It's higher rated. It's really set up for exterior application, but it really has all the functions that the district needs to have this. And so we're changing it out on Sunriver, going to look at that. There's nothing in here for Sisters or Pine at the moment. I think that's something that DPL wants to evaluate and consider of whether it's worth changing those doors out or not. And if so, that will come back to you guys at a future time. So these are all of them, the changes that are going in. The last one that's in here is the branch commissioning services. And this goes with the HVAC controls and the lighting controls. And we have a commissioning agent, and what they do, their role is they go out and they test all of our mechanical and electrical and plumbing systems, all the controls on it, to ensure that they are operating correctly, that they're installed correctly, and they're operating as designed and intended. And it's a really good checks and balances. Some of it is optional, some of it is code required. We do a lot of it on the bigger buildings because they're all big new systems. We really felt that with changing these controls out and making sure that even though the branches are small and simpler systems, You want them to operate at peak performance in order to get the value out of upgrades that are meant to, improve the energy efficiency and ultimately its life. So that's that cost. So there, a lot of this stuff was so interrelated. That's why I kind of wanted to talk about all four of them at once. But I wrote each one of them up so that it would be hopefully a little bit more direct on passing the authorization. So maybe questions? And did I confuse you really well?
I think you did
No.
great, good job.
Yeah, no, it's very clear. And is the decision to change out the glass doors in Sisters No Pine, are we waiting on budget type of information to see?
I think it's the budget to make sure, hey, it's still prudent, and I think there's probably some contingencies there to do it. And just, we wanted to focus on getting Sunriver because we had the opportunity to not buy the old one, but buy the new model and get
Right.
it ordered on time. And because Sisters and Lapine are already installed, and there's a kind of a temporary fix in place.
Right, and so we're going to have them put in some temporary measures to address the immediate safety concerns. And we're gonna see how it operates with those measures in place and determine whether we like them enough to accept them long-term for Lapine Sisters. And the reason I say that is because there's a certain impact to if we decide to pull out the existing systems of Lapine Sisters and install a new system. The biggest impact would be that the community room could be closed for a period of time while they work on that.
Right.
And then obviously any work that's going on there will be in close proximity to the children's area, so that'll have an impact on the kids too. So we want to think very carefully about how badly do we need to make that change out in addition to the cost impact.
Right, right. And but it is a doable thing. if
It's certainly
we decide-
doable, yeah.
Okay.
In changing the control systems, that's not gonna impact the library, services, they're not gonna have to close down.
They won't have to close. We'll have it set up where they do that work on days that the library is closed or off hours, after hours, and do that. There's a little bit of where it's gonna have like a certain amount of disruption of the surfaces, but not as impactful as tearing out the doors.
Yeah.
And the nice thing about the control, we have a very lean facilities department, it's basically Robert, 2 people, so, and a big county. So that's a real big impact. Talking about being able to control something from, and Sisters, when you're out in the pine, that's a huge time saving.
Right, I just think this makes a different world and could see where it would save tons of money and to be able to react in real time if somebody's got an issue at a branch and you're at the other end of the county, you can address it, so it's really a functionality thing in addition to
Yeah, it actually lets them do a certain amount of diagnostic right from the screen. It will tell them certain things of what's not working, what's shut down, because there's multiple units within a building.
Right.
So if something is, hey, it's getting hot in here, they can look and see, get a sense of what the issue is before going driving it. So.
Yeah, no, this makes all the sense in the world to me, and have staff be able to move from facility to facility and not have to relearn the control system every time.
It's really, you've mentioned this before, but this really shows it, how beneficial it's been having multiple projects, being able to learn from things and make changes. That's good.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, do I have them?
So there's 4 of them. You probably have to go through one by one.
Start, sure. Let's go back and forth. Exactly as we have been. I move to authorize the library director with signing authority up to $3,025,000 for the SunWest Builders Lapine Library GMP amended contract.
Yeah, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed, so that passes. Okay.
Okay, we'll move to the next one. I move to authorize the library director with signing authority up to $3,150,000 for the SunWest Builders Sisters Library GMP amended contract.
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, I move to authorize the library director with signing authority up to $3.5 million for the SunWest Builders Sunriver Library GMP amended contract.
Second.
Those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries.
I move to authorize the library director with signing authority up to $500,000 for branch commissioning services.
I'll second.
All those in favor? All opposed? Motion carries.
Okay.
That was easy.
It's reminding me of name that tune.
Oh, we get to hear from somebody else.
I only come here when I
Not that
need
it
money.
hasn't been great, Craig.
I need money and a signature right now.
Right.
So y'all read the memo, and you probably can see that I shopped around the last year or so. Figure out how we were gonna supplement or how we were gonna replace the previous contract for MFPs and printers, copiers, etc. Actually, I stumbled upon something that was never an option for us before, which is NASPO. It's an organization that looks at all municipal contracts across the United States and allows other municipalities legally to not go out for bid, but to use an existing RFP or bid process to sign long-term contracts for equipment and software and services and all sorts. Anyway, in this scenario, it's kind of a no-brainer. We're paying $66.47 a month for 45 devices right now. If we were to go into this contract, we're gonna cut that down by at least $3,000 a month. Yeah. And I think it's probably the last time we're gonna get that kind of savings too, because that market's kind of dying right now. So everybody still wants to be able to print, but they're being told by their managers, supervisors, stop printing things and start collaborating electronically. So you have a big push to, it's more of a fist fight now between those companies. So we looked around. I had been talking with Kelly Connect, who is formerly Kelly Imaging. Been talking to them since, I don't know, way back. You were in Rotary and with somebody,
Oh, gosh, that's
one of the vice presidents of Kelly Connect. They're a pretty big company. They're in a growth model right now where they have about 1,000 employees, five states. They have 10 trucks in Central Oregon for service. They're pretty bulletproof. We've had a lot of good luck with them thus far for other things. So it looks like this is really the option. And I just need you guys to sign it. Or just sign off on it. That's all I can say.
Probably one of the easiest sells.
We're down by 48%. This is a direct fleet flip, so essentially it is replacing all that we have today with brand new equipment for the same price.
Wow.
Right. Any questions?
Any questions? Have a
Let's go
motion?
to Safeway and pay shop for our groceries.
I move to authorize the library director with signing authority up to $300,000 for a 60-month lease agreement with Kelly Connect for MFP services and support.
I will second.
All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, Mark. Thanks for finding this.
Yeah, this is great.
Like I say, there's quite the fist fight going on, but they're all trying to beat each other, and the way they do that is to find these governmental avenues and then throw their prices down really low.
And you said you just kind of stumbled on this?
Well, it's, no, I've known about Nashville for years. They've been around since 1947, but they've never been, last time I came to you guys, they weren't competitive at the price. It was still more, most companies were still more expensive, 3 million. And there were less flexibility in the leases. But it was like with this lease, this is a coterminous lease, so obviously we're not putting machines on day one into Stevens Range. I'm sorry, Central. But on the day we decide to put those machines in, I'm not gonna have to sign an extended contract. It'll just fall into this contract and we'll still be under the limit, the 300,000, so. You gotta be happy with that.
We are. We're very happy.
Okay, so I guess I adjourned. Okay, so we're adjourning the board meeting, and we are now going to have a joint meeting of the Deschutes Public Library Board and Local Contract Review Board. The purpose of this public hearing is to take comments on the district's draft findings supporting the exemption of certain classes of special procurements and public improvement contracts from competitive bidding requirements. And do I ask for public, do we have any public comments about this?
We don't have
Okay. Okay, so, all right.
So for the resolution, have Robert explain a bit, but just to remind you, if it seems familiar, we just did this in April. We did, and then what happens is the legislature changes the rules, and in the past, we've kind of gone through 10-year increments and then adopted them. And just felt like we should be adopting these as they happen to save confusion. And also so that we're not bringing you 30 different things. And for example, this one, there's just a couple of small things that change.
Yeah.
So hopefully making that easier for you all to kind of get a sense of what's happening. So I will let Robert explain.
Yeah,
I want to ask a question. So
Absolutely.
did you take this, which was horrible to read, and put it in a more normal language? I can
the short answer is yes.
Thank
So
you very much.
this resolution document comes from the lawyers, as you might have guessed when you read through it, and it seemed like a legally binding contract, right? So this really came direct from our legal counsel at Local Government Law Group, and they were the ones that notified us of this change to come out of the legislature. But really, the kernel of what's going on in this resolution that's been translated into our purchasing rules document is that the legislature changed the dollar amounts for various definitions of procurements. So you've got small procurements, you have intermediate procurements, and you have significant procurements. Small procurements, under our purchasing rules, small procurements essentially fall under the scope and purview of a department manager. It's small enough that we enable the manager to make a decision about whether to apply funds that they've budgeted for in the annual budget that gets approved and appropriated by the board. The intermediate procurements are ones that fall within either the library director's purview or above a certain amount, we bring before the board. But what makes it an intermediate procurement is that the legislation surrounding public contracting rules for formal RFP process don't necessarily need to apply for an intermediate procurement. The board or the director, depending on the dollar amount, can opt to apply an informal RFP process. So you could loosen some of those rules that you have to follow in a formal RFP of issuing a notice to the public, gathering various responses and then evaluating them on criteria, and then developing a recommendation to the purchasing authority. Those rules can be loosened up in that intermediate range. And in fact, sometimes what we'll do is we'll go out for a request for quote, and we'll gather 3 relevant quotes from credible sources. And maybe it's a simple enough procurement that we don't need them to develop a full-on proposal. The details are in the quote. one thing that fell in that range this past year was the repainting of the admin building. We reached out to multiple paint vendors. We gathered 3 credible quotes. We didn't issue a big formal request for proposals with a scope written out, and you have to develop a proposal, and all the overhead that a vendor would have to write a proposal against. It might not make enough sense for them to even bid against it if the dollar amount of what they're going to make isn't offsetting the amount of time that they're going to spend to write a proposal. That's where that informal intermediate applies. So what's the upshot of this resolution is the threshold for small can now be legally raised from 10,000 up to 25,000. 25,000 seemed like a reasonable increase in that threshold for us to say that's still within a healthy range where a manager who is responsible for managing their budget on that annual basis could make a selection from a vendor and compare it against the amount they have budgeted and say, yep, that makes sense. Yeah, I think that this vendor can provide that service. The intermediate range would then start at 25 and goes up to 250. Now, that part didn't change. I think that was one of the elements that we brought in April, was that upper range. So really it is just that boundary between the small procurement and the intermediate procurement that's changing. That's really the extent of it. Now, yeah,
Just
go
as
ahead.
a reminder, as you see here, the board has also set their own policy in the financial conditions is, at $150,000, that's when I will bring things to the board. So we can kind of, as you see, we have put in our own spot there.
Yeah. I will say that the one area that these changes do not apply to comes up very infrequently. It is the regulated personal services category. This basically is professional personal services from highly technical professionals, things like architects, engineers, as in professional engineer licensed, photogrammetrists, which I don't even know what that role is, but I can find out for you. Transportation planners and land surveyors. This division out of the public contracting rules really applies to other kinds of public agencies than libraries. It is very infrequent that we are directly going to architects or engineers, and when we do, it's usually being governed under the public infrastructure and improvement part of procurement. So we work it through the bond funds and Greg's report to the board. So that's really the only thing that's not changing. If you look at the purchasing rules, the changes you see there are on all those other tables. The amount at that threshold point has been changed from 10,000 to 25,000. That's the big change in the document.
Questions or concerns?
Is that the case under regulated personal services, though, that $10,000 amount stays?
That one stays at 10,000, yeah, and that is aligned with Oregon revised statute.
Okay.
Yeah.
We have a motion.
I move to adopt resolution 20 on behalf of the Deschutes Public Library District and on behalf of the district's local contract review board.
Second. I'll second. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion carries. I will adjourn the joint meeting of the Deschutes Public Library Board and the local contract review. That's where you're saying. Okay. Sorry. I'll be glad. Didn't you want to say that? I do.
Oh, sorry about that. I didn't know you had one.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't even know I had.
Yes.
Okay, so I think we're. Oh. Got through all of that.
So
Greg, I didn't, thank you. You had a lot to say. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Okay, so,
now just we need to.
oh, I've got to resume, sorry.
Yes.
We will now resume our library board meeting, and with that, library news.
Before we start, Chantal, are you gonna have any news for us? No? Okay. Okay. First, event, since we have a lot there, not a lot to add, except the biggest news is the train man is coming back. And well, a couple of things. We have our art, reception in Sisters at noon, which we're very excited about. It's gonna be a very exciting, can you tell us about that piece?
Yes, okay, so we have, Ashland artist Christy Coon, who was selected by the art committee a few months ago, and she's installing her work on this coming Friday. It's beautiful. It's a fiber piece that will extend about 8 feet long on the wall in the Sisters, community room. So it's going to be the blues and greens and cream colors, and we're really looking forward to get some art and color in that space. So we're having a reception for her on Saturday, starting at noon. That's this coming Saturday, the 16th, and it's noon to 1:30.
If that's not your cup of tea, you can go see the Train Man, who's also starting Saturday at the Downtown Bend Library. And it's been a couple of years, basically since COVID, that it's been there. If you haven't seen him before, I highly recommend it. He'll be there throughout the next week and partially into the week after that. So really excited to have that back.
He hasn't been there, the last time he was there was pre-COVID.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Cause I took 3 of my grandsons, so that was the last one.
I know, my one grandson was a
She
baby,
brings drink.
so doesn't even remember. Hey,
Foundation news?
we announced the authors at the Unveiled event. And the Unveiled event was a smash hit as always. It was super fun, really well attended, spirited trivia contests as usual. And I think this year's books are gonna be super exciting. I've been hearing lots of good reports from people that are really, there's more excitement around these books than in many years, I think. I think they've really captured people's imaginations, just from what I'm hearing on the street. So, we have 3 outstanding authors coming next year.
And Lamont.
Anne Lamott in February. Okay, you should say, because it's like I don't have my list and it will take too long to go through my phone.
So we have Anne Lamott, and if you all haven't ever read her, 2 great books that I think she did were some of her early ones, Traveling with Cities and Bird Vipers. She's coming February 2nd, which is a Friday, then High. And then we have Stephanie Land, who wrote the book Made, that became a Netflix hit. And she just released a book called Class. And she's coming March 1st, Friday, at Then High. And then our final book is, Breaking Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmer, and she's coming Thursday, May 16th, 7 o'clock at Then High.
Yeah, I think it's really a diverse group that is gonna appeal to a lot of different types of readers and a lot of different ages of readers. So.
Yeah, and really quick, so tickets are on sale right now and we're doing really well. But we're selling the whole series right now, and so you can't buy individual tickets yet, and we do that on purpose so that people get nervous and think they have to buy the whole series, which works and it's wonderful. And no, I'm kidding, but it's worth it because it's a discounted rate for the whole series, so you get all 3 authors. So those are on sale until January 8th, and then we'll allow individual ticket sales to occur after that, as well as the series.
Right.
And Andy forgot to mention about Todd at Phenomenal Again.
Oh, the highlight.
Just work up
of
for
the
it.
unveil ceremony was
Good job.
Todd in a shark suit, and it was stunning.
I've already
People
booked it
are
for my
still
birthday
talking.
parties for my grandkids.
Yes,
It's under other duties as assigned.
yes, it's only added to the cult following that you already possess.
Yes.
So it was like, it was awesome. It was so much fun.
It was
Yeah.
kind of fun at the unveiling, because people were figured out real quickly when they saw the shark, gummies that they had, and then they were handing out shark necklaces, shark tooth necklaces, and it was so fun listening to people trying to figure out, okay, it's an underwater theme, trying to guess the book.
Yeah, it was, as always, it was a surprise, but it was, I'm excited to read it. So,
So, critical communication,
I did not identify any from this. The biggest critical communication we're gonna have is, with our bank, paying off, the property, so.
okay, so ready for self-review, so, Leanne, how about you start?
Sure. Good meeting. I think we'll be out of here by 1:30. But Greg, thanks again for your report and the way it, you have it laid out. It's great. Appreciate that, the organization and your detail. And Mark, thank you for being here. Appreciate your efforts
Thank you.
and, saving that. Yeah, saving a little money for the budget. So yeah, thank you for your efforts. Appreciate it.
yeah, I thought it was a great meeting. Never have we spent so much money in such a short amount of time. But I think part of the reason for that was your reports were so well explained, and your verbal reports were so clear. And the benefit, I think, that we're getting out of all of this is so clear that it made the decisions really easy. And with yours too, Mark, gee, it's hard to say no to. And I just, it caused me to reflect on, I know that we selected our contractors with care. And there's a lot that can go sideways during a construction project, as I'm sure you know way better than I do. But the fact that we have contractors that are willing to work with us and to be flexible and to accommodate change within the scope of the work that was proposed is really a very valuable thing during a construction project. So I think we did a great job selecting really fine contractors. And then you've provided fantastic oversight to make sure that everything is working smoothly. So I just am really encouraged by that. I think these projects are wonderful, so.
Yeah, thank you. I felt like we were throwing a lot at you at this meeting, so, just highlight that usually this is when Emily comes and speaks, and I really felt like, one, I wanted her to have lots of time, and the other one was, it's such an important talk that I wanted to have as many board members as possible, so looking forward to her next month. I think you're right about who we select working on these projects, working with Greg and Redmond. It's really highlighted this month, and we're seeing other public agencies that are having to cut their bond projects in half. Because of cost overruns and, just really nice to know that we're in good hands, that we're really looking closely at these things so that we are able to actually accomplish everything that we're setting out to do. Is very exciting. So thank you for your support.
well, thank you for agreeing with everything Ann said, but, I think one of the biggest things that we have, and I kind of had a conversation with a couple of friends about this in Redmond. There's so many checks and balances built into this that I think that's one of the reasons I feel much more comfortable. This one person said, Cynthia, who are you to be deciding on these millions of dollars expenditures? And I said, I don't decide everything. I just get to have a whole bunch of reports come to me and I make decisions. But anyway, I think that's been a great thing for us. Thank you for taking the legalese and turning it into language I can understand. And Mark, thank you for finding out a way to save us some money as we're spending all this money. So thank you. And Lori, thank you
Yes.
for.
Thank
treats.
you. Thank you. You brighten our meetings.
So, good meeting and, well, we'll adjourn.
Okay.